Before we dive in, if you love epic tales of war, strategy, hit that subscribe and like button, turn on notifications, and join our growing legion of warriors. Now, let's begin. Imagine a war so ancient, so entrenched in the fabric of the cosmos, that it predates Earth's very existence. A war that had raged across countless star systems, consuming entire civilizations, reshaping the fate of galaxies, and yet, never ending. It was a conflict that had persisted for over 1,000,000 years, a war fought between two dominant superpowers, the Zilari Dominion and the Vornak Swarm. These civilizations were once considered the peak of technological and military might in the known universe. They had conquered thousands of worlds, eradicated countless species, and rewritten the laws of warfare itself. And yet, for all their power, for all their brilliance, neither side could claim victory. The war had long since devolved into an unbreakable stalemate. Their weapons could wipe out planets. Their warships could darken entire star systems. But every victory was met with an equal and opposite retaliation. It was an endless cycle of destruction. The Zilari, a highly advanced machine-like race, believed in absolute order and control. Their fleets were enormous, their strategies mathematically precise. The Vornak, on the other hand, were a nightmarish, biological swarm, adaptable, relentless, and terrifying in their sheer numbers. To outsiders, this war seemed eternal, an unchangeable fact of the universe itself. And then, humanity arrived. Compared to these ancient titans, Earth was insignificant. It had only recently discovered faster-than-light travel. Its presence in the galaxy was a mere footnote in the annals of history. Humanity had not conquered 1,000 worlds. It did not command fleets numbering in the trillions. To the Zilari and Vornak, humans were primitive, unworthy of even a passing mention in their strategic calculations. But what the galaxy failed to realize was that Earth was unlike any species before it. While the warring factions had been locked in their endless conflict, humanity had been watching, learning, and in secret, buried deep within the gas clouds of Jupiter. A project was underway that would change the fate of the galaxy forever. Earth's experimental fleet. It was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Each ship was a masterpiece of innovation, a fusion of human ingenuity and stolen alien technology. Where the Zilari relied on logic and precision, humanity introduced chaos and unpredictability. Where the Vornak adapted biologically over generations, humanity adapted instantly. The experimental fleet was designed not just to fight, but to end wars. The project had taken decades. Deep within Jupiter's storm-racked depths, entire shipyards had been built in secrecy. Advanced AI systems had been developed, capable of thinking faster than light itself. Weaponry beyond conventional understanding had been forged. Gravitational pulse cannons that bent space-time to strike targets before they even saw the shot coming. Quantum shift plating that rendered ships functionally invisible, and, most terrifying of all, a new kind of warfare. Psychological, technological, and strategic warfare fused into a single devastating force. The galaxy scoffed. The Zilari, masters of logic, found the idea laughable. How could a species so young disrupt a war that had outlived entire civilizations? The Vornak, consumed by their evolutionary hunger, barely acknowledged humanity's existence. And so, when Earth announced that it was entering the war, no one believed it mattered. The date was chosen carefully. It was the moment when the largest battle in over 10,000 years was about to take place, one that would have likely cost trillions of lives. The Zilari and Vornak had positioned their fleets across an entire sector, prepared for another century of war. Humanity? It deployed 12 ships. Not 12,000, not 12 million, just 12. It was an insult, a joke, a meaningless gesture, and then the impossible happened. The first shot was fired before the enemy even realized the battle had begun. Zilari warships, designed to predict every possible enemy movement, found themselves flanked before their scanners even registered the threat. The Vornak, a species that had never known fear, felt it for the first time. Humanity did not fight like an empire locked in old strategies. It fought like an apex predator, adapting to the battlefield in real time. The The fleet's AI systems broke enemy encryption within seconds. Zalari targeting systems were overridden, their weapons turned against their own ships. Vornak carriers, designed to spew endless waves of biological horrors, were sterilized mid-launch, their swarms cut down before they could even reach their targets. And then came the first true shock. The largest Zalari war fortress, an artificial moon that had served as the heart of their military operations for thousands of years, was reduced to nothing in a single strike. One ship, one human battleship. A gravitational torpedo bent the laws of physics, creating a singularity inside the fortress's core. There was no explosion, just silence. The fortress collapsed inward, vanishing into nothingness in a fraction of a second. The Vornak, whose strength had always been their hive-mind coordination, suddenly found themselves blind. The experimental fleet's electronic warfare capabilities severed their neural connections, turning their once perfect formations into mindless chaos. For the first time in a million years, the swarm did not attack as a single, unstoppable force. It fractured. The battle, which should have lasted decades, was over in hours. Humanity had done the impossible. It had turned the tide of a war that no one believed could ever be won. And then, the galaxy fell silent. The surviving Zalari ships fled. The Vornak, once thought to be unstoppable, retreated into the void. And in that moment, every species watching from the sidelines realized a terrible truth. Earth was not just another minor species. Earth was a threat, and this was just the beginning. The aftermath of the battle sent shockwaves across the galaxy. Species that had once ignored humanity now scrambled to understand how a race so young had just rewritten the rules of war. The Galactic Council, an ancient institution formed to maintain some semblance of order between the universe's most powerful civilizations, convened an emergency session. The topic? Earth. The Council had seen empires rise and fall. It had witnessed planetary annihilations, species extinctions, and wars that had lasted longer than Earth's entire recorded history. But never had they seen a war. One that had shaped the cosmos for over 1,000,000 years, end in a single day. And never before had they seen a species achieve such a feat with so little effort. It was unnatural, impossible. For the first time, the galaxy realized that humanity was different. The question now was, how? The answer lay in something no other species had ever truly mastered: unpredictability. While the Zalari and Vornak had fought for eons, their strategies had become predictable. The Zalari, bound by logic, relied on calculations and algorithms to determine the best course of action. Every move they made was a result of cold, mathematical precision. The Vornak, driven by their biological instincts, adapted over generations, learning and evolving with each battle. But both sides were bound by patterns. They could be anticipated, countered. Humanity, on the other hand, had no such limitations. Unlike the Zalari, humans did not rely solely on logic. Unlike the Vornak, they did not evolve over time. They evolved instantly. Humans were not bound by rigid strategies or ancient traditions. They fought with a level of unpredictability that made them impossible to counter. They rewrote warfare as they fought it, and then there was the fleet itself. The experimental fleet was a technological nightmare, a contradiction that defied every known principle of war. It was designed to be unstoppable. Phase-shifting hulls. These allowed the ships to move between different states of matter, making them impervious to conventional weaponry. Plasma cannons, railguns, even gravitational distortions passed through them as if they weren't there. Quantum AI warfare. Each ship was controlled by an artificial intelligence capable of making millions of strategic calculations per second. It could predict enemy movements before they made them, and then change its own tactics faster than the enemy could react. Reality disruptors. A weapon that had no equivalent in the galaxy. Instead of simply destroying targets, it erased them from existence by destabilizing the quantum field around them. Zalari warships would see a human vessel fire, only to realize the shot had already hit them before they even registered it. But perhaps the most terrifying advantage was not in the technology itself. It was the human mind. Every alien species had fought wars in predictable ways. The Zalari believed in numbers, precision, and overwhelming force. The Vornak relied on their sheer biological dominance. Even the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy followed established doctrines. Humanity? It thrived in chaos. The 12 ships had not merely outgunned their enemies. They had outthought them. When Zalari command ships detected human vessels, their logic-driven AIs calculated the best possible defense. They predicted fleet formations, movement patterns, and attack angles. But when the battle began, humanity did something unthinkable. They did nothing. For an entire minute, the 12 ships simply floated in space, motionless. Zalari war processors struggled to understand. Was it a trick? A communication delay? A miscalculation? And then, without warning, the fleet split. Not into a formation, not into a logical battle line, into chaos. Some ships charged forward at speeds beyond detection. Others flickered in and out of existence, appearing and disappearing at random. Some even drifted backward, breaking every known law of tactical combat. The Zalari processors collapsed under the strain. Their entire civilization had been built on the idea that war was a game of precise, calculated moves. Their AIs could not comprehend an enemy that had no discernible pattern. Their targeting systems lagged behind by precious milliseconds, long, enough for the first 10,000 Zalari warships to be erased from existence. The Vornak, used to overwhelming enemies with sheer biological mass, found themselves fighting an enemy that did not hold still. The human fleet targeted their swarm leaders first, severing the connections between drones. Where before the Vornak had moved with terrifying synchronicity, now they became individual creatures, scattered, confused, uncoordinated. The swarm collapsed into chaos, unable to react as human weapons burned through their flesh like fire through dry leaves. And then came the final strike. Humanity had not come to fight this war. It had come to end it. At the center of the battlefield, a single human ship, a black featureless monolith unlike anything ever seen before, activated its primary weapon. It had no name, no designation. The only thing recorded was the signal it emitted, a single pulse, a low hum that rippled across the void, and then everything stopped. Zalari war processors shut down. Their ships drifted lifeless, as if they had simply forgotten how to function. Vornak creatures convulsed, their neural pathways scrambled by an energy they could not understand. The battle, which had begun with trillions of combatants, was over. 12 human ships had ended a million-year war in a single day. And for the first time in galactic history, the most powerful species in the universe asked themselves the same question. What if humanity wasn't here to liberate the galaxy? What if humanity was here to rule it? The battlefield was silent. The void, once filled with the roars of warships, the detonations of planet-cracking weapons, and the screams of dying warriors, was now eerily still. The Zalari command fleets, once the most advanced in the galaxy, floated lifelessly. Their once glorious ships, designed to calculate trillions of possibilities per second, now could not comprehend what had happened to them. Their processors, built to counter every conceivable threat, had been rendered useless. For the first time in a million years, the Zalari did something unprecedented. They stopped fighting. The Vornak, once an unstoppable biological force, twitched and convulsed as their neural pathways shattered under the weight of an unseen, incomprehensible signal. These creatures, bred for eternal war, felt something they had never experienced before: paralysis. Their instincts had always guided them, an unbreakable biological imperative that had driven them to slaughter and consume without end. But now, they were adrift in space, their massive, nightmarish forms twitching uselessly, unable to coordinate, unable to think. Humanity had not just defeated them, it had overwritten them, and then the human fleet spoke. A single transmission, broadcast across every frequency, in every language, in every form of communication the galaxy had ever known. It was not a declaration of victory. It was not a demand for surrender. It was a question. Do you understand now? The words rippled across the void. The surviving Zalari, their processors slowly reactivating, tried to respond. Their ancient, logic-bound minds struggled to compute the situation. They searched for an answer, a counter-strategy, a way forward. There was none. For the first time since the war had begun, the Zilari accepted a reality they had never considered. They had lost. And worse. They had lost in a way that defied everything they believed about war. It wasn't strength. It wasn't numbers. It wasn't superior firepower. It was something beyond their comprehension. The Vornak, whose very existence was defined by conquest, struggled against the signal that held them in place. Their war forms, each one a towering organic behemoth capable of reducing planets to barren husks, trembled in the silence. The Zilari had lost the battle through logic, but the Vornak had lost something deeper. They had lost their instinct. For ons they had consumed, spread, devoured. They had never known fear, only hunger. But now, something new coursed through them. Something alien. A terrible, incomprehensible emotion that none of their kind had ever experienced before. Doubt. The experimental fleet had not simply crushed the Vornak's war efforts. It had shattered the very foundation of their being. And then, the black monolith, the unknown ship at the heart of the battlefield, moved. It did not move like a vessel bound by the laws of physics. It did not accelerate. It did not shift position in a way that made sense. It simply was. One moment, it was at the center of the conflict. The next, it had drifted toward the ruined Zilari command ships. The next, it loomed over the Vornak. Its presence was a statement. Humanity had arrived. Across the galactic community, the impossible battle was being observed. Civilizations that had once considered humanity insignificant now watched in stunned silence. The Zilari and Vornak had been the two most powerful forces in existence, and they had just been erased from the battlefield in a single day. Now, the question on every ruler's mind was the same. What does humanity want? For thousands of years, the war between the Zilari and Vornak had defined galactic politics. Their endless conflict had shaped alliances, determined trade routes, and dictated which civilizations thrived or perished. Many species had survived by staying neutral, carefully balancing their allegiance between the two powers. Now, that balance had been shattered. 1,000 empires, scattered across the stars, suddenly realized a new hierarchy was being established, and humanity was at the top. Within hours of the battle's end, distress signals, diplomatic messages, and desperate transmissions flooded every available channel. Some species begged for peace, some demanded an explanation. Others, terrified beyond reason, declared their own preemptive war against Earth. It did not matter, because humanity had not come to bargain. It had not come to negotiate its place in the galaxy. It had come to claim it. And as the experimental fleet vanished without a trace, disappearing from the battlefield as suddenly as it had arrived, the rest of the universe was left to grapple with a terrifying new reality. The million-year war had not simply ended. It had been erased. And now, the real war was about to begin. Panic spread across the galaxy like wildfire. The balance of power, something once thought immutable, had been shattered in a single day. Civilizations that had survived by carefully navigating the eternal war between the Zilari and Vornak now found themselves adrift in uncertainty. Some had pledged their loyalty to the Zilari's cold, calculated order, believing that logic and reason would eventually lead to galactic stability. Others had aligned with the Vornak, hoping that the destruction of the Zilari would end the war and allow them to rule in the aftermath. But neither side had won. Humanity had rewritten the rules. For those who had always considered Earth a backwater, an insignificant anomaly, the revelation was devastating. The galactic archives contained little information on humans, at least nothing that could explain this. They were known as a young species, limited in numbers, far behind the technological titans of the cosmos. Their home system had only been discovered a few centuries ago, and until now, their expansion had been slow and methodical, never threatening the established empires. So how had they built a fleet that could erase 1 million years of warfare in a single battle? Leaders across the stars scrambled to find answers. But the truth was even more terrifying than they could imagine. Humanity had not revealed its true strength. The fleet that had devastated the Zilari and Vornak, the strange black monolith that had rewritten the very foundation of warfare, it was an experiment, a single test, a proof of concept. and it had worked. As governments collapsed and military strategists scrambled to reassess their understanding of war, deep in the core of the most powerful empires, secret meetings were held. Kings, warlords, and high councils debated the same question. Was there still a way to stop humanity? The answer was complicated. Some believed that humans had merely deployed an experimental weapon, something that could be countered if they could analyze it in time. They proposed immediate attacks on Earth before humanity could deploy a second strike. Others, however, saw the truth. The real weapon wasn't a ship. It wasn't a fleet. It was the way humans thought. For all their technological brilliance, the Zalari had been predictable. Their reliance on logic and probability had made them the most formidable strategists in the galaxy, but it also made them rigid. Every move they made was calculated, optimized, and confined by probabilities. Humans were different. They were unpredictable, irrational, chaotic. Where other species followed patterns, humans invented new ones, and their greatest weapon wasn't technology. It was the ability to break the rules of war itself. This was why the Zalari had lost. Their ships were built to counter logical, measurable threats. But humanity had introduced something that could not be predicted, could not be measured, and could not be countered with standard tactics. As for the Vornak, their loss had been even more profound. The organic monstrosities had never encountered an enemy that could attack the very essence of their existence. Their power came from instinct, a deeply embedded biological imperative that had guided their endless hunger for war. But instinct was a pattern, and patterns could be rewritten. The experimental fleet had shattered the neural pathways that drove the Vornak to fight, overriding their basic impulses. It wasn't just a battlefield victory. It was evolutionary conquest. The Vornak had not simply been defeated. They had been reprogrammed. This realization sent shockwaves through the galaxy. If humanity had the ability to override the instincts of an entire species, then what else could they do? Whispers of fear turned into screams of paranoia. In the days following the battle, entire civilizations began to crumble under their own panic. Some species, unwilling to take the risk of facing humanity's unknown power, surrendered preemptively. They sent envoys to Earth, swearing loyalty before a war had even begun. Others chose the opposite path. If annihilation was inevitable, they would not go quietly. A dozen fleets mobilized, launching towards Earth in a desperate attempt to strike before humanity could unleash a second attack. Their logic was simple. If they could destroy the homeworld before humanity fully mobilized, perhaps they could avoid total domination. They never reached their destination. The fleets vanished. No wreckage, no distress signals, no traces of battle. They were there one moment and gone the next. Across the galaxy, observers fell into terrified silence. No one knew what had happened, but one thing was certain. Humanity had responded, and whatever had happened to those fleets, it sent a message louder than any declaration of war. The million-year war was over. But something far worse had taken its place. Because now, every species in the galaxy knew a truth they could not ignore. They were no longer the rulers of the stars. Humanity was. And as the black monolith returned to Earth's orbit, silent, unmoving, a symbol of something far greater than technology or warfare, the galaxy realized that whatever had happened on the battlefield, it was only the beginning. The silence that followed the battle was more terrifying than the war itself. For 1,000,000 years, the galaxy had known only conflict. Wars waged across the void, civilizations rising and falling in an endless cycle. But now there was nothing. No clashes of war fleets, no desperate last stands, just the echo of something far worse, the unknown. Governments tried to maintain control, but fear spread faster than any fleet. Entire civilizations, once confident in their strength, now found themselves gripped by the inescapable reality of what had just happened. The war that had shaped the galaxy for 1,000,000 years had ended in one day. And it hadn't ended with diplomacy. It hadn't ended with one side claiming victory. It had ended because humanity had decided it would end. The weight of that realization sent entire species into panic. Some of the more warlike empires, still clinging to the old ways, refused to believe it. They declared that the battle had been a fluke, that Earth had lucked into victory with a surprise weapon that couldn't be replicated. To them, humans were still a minor power. The galaxy belonged to its true rulers, so they gathered their forces. They called upon their allies. They mustered everything they had and sent it straight for the Sol system. It was a demonstration, a show of force to remind the galaxy that power still rested in the hands of those who had ruled for eons. 300 battle groups, drawn from every major empire that had once participated in the war, a force greater than anything the Zilari or the Vornak had ever assembled in their million-year conflict. Each fleet was commanded by a species that had dominated its region of space. Each armada carried the deadliest weapons the galaxy had ever known. They moved with absolute certainty that their arrival would force humanity to negotiate, to surrender their newfound power, to reveal their secrets, to be put in their rightful place. They never arrived. One by one, their ships simply vanished. It wasn't destruction. It wasn't a battle. It was as if they had been erased from existence itself. No explosions, no distress signals, nothing. The galaxy watched in horror. For the first time in recorded history, no one understood what had happened. This was no ordinary technological advantage. This was something beyond reason, beyond logic, beyond war itself. And then, the message came. It wasn't transmitted in a language. It wasn't broadcast across the stars. It appeared. Across every screen, every data slate, every neural implant in the galaxy. A single sentence, a simple declaration. There will be no more war. Nothing more. No demands. No threats. No ultimatum. Just a statement of fact. Some tried to resist. They attempted to strike at Earth in secret, sending assassination teams, sabotage, missions, infiltration squads. None returned. Even more chilling, they were not replaced. Every empire that had sent a team soon discovered that its agents had been forgotten. Not just missing, not just lost. It was as if they had never existed at all. Records were erased, memories altered. Entire intelligence divisions woke up one morning unable to recall who they had sent, what their mission had been, or even why they had ever considered opposing humanity in the first place. The galaxy had faced destruction before. It had known war, extinction, planetary annihilation. But this was something different. This was control. Not through brute force, not through weapons or fleets, but through something deeper, something far more terrifying. The question was no longer how humanity had done this, it was why, and the answer would shake the galaxy to its core. In the days that followed, the galaxy stood still. The great empires that had ruled for millennia, their fleets shattered, their leaders in disarray, were now faced with a reality they couldn't comprehend. Humanity hadn't simply ended the war. They had rewritten the very rules of existence. But how? Some believed Earth had discovered a technology so advanced that it bordered on divinity. The ability to erase fleets, to alter memories, to make entire operations disappear as if they had never been conceived. It defied logic. It defied science. The greatest minds across the galaxy tried to decipher it, to find some pattern, some weakness, something that could explain what had happened. They found nothing. The only certainty was that humanity had chosen not to exterminate its enemies. Had it wanted to, Earth could have erased every empire, every civilization, every trace of history that had once defined the galaxy. But it hadn't. Instead, it had left them all crippled, but alive. Some interpreted it as mercy. Others saw it as something far more sinister. An experiment. Was that the real purpose behind the experimental fleet? Had Earth been testing something far greater than weapons? Was the battle merely a demonstration, a way to show the galaxy what humanity was now capable of? If so, what came next? No one dared to act against Earth now. No fleets were sent. No secret alliances were formed. Even the most war-hardened species, the ones that had known only conquest for their entire existence, hesitated. But silence was not enough. They needed answers. And so, the Galactic conquered. what little remained of it, sent a delegation. The Yadi, most powerful political leaders, the greatest scholars, the most advanced artificial intelligences, they all traveled to Earth, seeking an audience with the architects of this new reality. For the first time in known history, every major species of the galaxy gathered in one place, not to negotiate a peace treaty, not to divide the spoils of war, but to beg for understanding. And humanity chose to speak. The delegation was received not by a single ruler, not by an emperor or warlord, but by a collective of human representatives, scientists, strategists, and philosophers. What they revealed changed everything. Humanity had not stumbled upon some ancient superweapon. They had not been gifted power by some long-forgotten race. What they had created, what they had unleashed, was the result of a single, terrifying truth. War was inefficient. For over 1,000,000 years, the civilizations of the galaxy had built their power on the foundation of war. Resources were spent on fleets, weapons, and soldiers. Entire economies depended on conflict. Every major scientific advancement had been driven by the need to destroy others before being destroyed themselves. But to humanity, war was obsolete. We saw the same pattern in our own history, one of the human representatives explained. For thousands of years, we fought each other, just as you have. We built weapons that could wipe out entire civilizations, just as you have. We wasted centuries locked in conflict, convinced that war was the natural state of existence. They paused, and then we learned. The delegation listened, stunned into silence. We discovered that war was not a test of strength. It was not an inevitable part of intelligent life. It was a failure of imagination, a refusal to evolve. Humanity had developed the means to erase conflict itself, not through destruction, not through conquest, but through intervention on a level no one had ever imagined. We do not need to fight you, the humans continued, because we can end your wars before they begin. We can remove the desire for war itself. That was the final revelation. Humanity's experimental fleet had not deployed weapons, it had deployed control, not through force, not through occupation, but through something far more terrifying, neural rewriting. With the push of a button, Earth could alter the thoughts, beliefs, and memories of any individual, any army, any civilization. It could make entire species forget how to make war. It could reshape the very way they thought. That was why the fleets had disappeared. That was why the assassination squads had been erased from memory. That was why the war had ended in one day. It wasn't that humanity had won. It was that no one could fight them anymore. The realization sent shockwaves through the delegation. Some recoiled in horror. Others struggled to process the sheer scale of what they had just learned. This wasn't just technological superiority. This was dominion over thought itself. The question that no one dared to ask was the only one that mattered now. If humanity could do this to them, what else had they already done? The galaxy stood on the precipice of something far greater than war. A new order. A new reality. And humanity was already in control. The silence in the great chamber was suffocating. The delegates, the most powerful individuals in the galaxy, sat frozen in their seats, struggling to process what they had just heard. The war that had raged for over 1,000,000 years hadn't just ended. It had been erased from existence. Every strategy, every fleet formation, every act of aggression that had once defined the galactic order, all had been undone in a matter of hours, and the worst part, no one had seen it coming. Humanity had not waged war. They had simply rewritten reality. One of the delegates, a supreme chancellor of the Zelkari Dominion, a species that had conquered entire star systems with brute force, finally found the strength to speak. You mean to tell us that you have the power to manipulate our very minds? That you can rewrite our history? Change our thoughts? Remove our desire to fight? A human representative nodded. Yes, the chancellor's mandibles clicked in frustration. And you expect us to accept this? To live under the shadow of an empire that controls our very will? Another human, an older woman with eyes as sharp as a blade, leaned forward. Her voice was calm, patient, yet unyielding. We are not your rulers. We are not your conquerors. We have no interest in controlling your Civilizations, she let the words hang in the air, but we will ensure that war is never waged again. The implications were staggering. Every civilization in the galaxy had been built upon war. Without it, their political structures, their economic models, their very way of life would collapse. For some, this was liberation. For others, it was a death sentence. A representative from the Vornar Confederacy, a species that had survived through centuries of tactical supremacy, stood abruptly. His biosynthetic implants flickered in distress. You speak of peace, but this is control. This is tyranny. You have taken away our right to make our own choices. The human woman met his gaze. And what choice did you have before? The Vornar fell silent. Was your civilization not locked in war? Were your people not suffering under the weight of endless conflict? Did your leaders not send millions to die in battles that led to nothing but more destruction? Her voice remained steady. You had no choice. War was not a choice. It was a cycle, one that you were doomed to repeat, until we broke it. The room darkened as holographic projections filled the chamber. Scenes of devastation, entire worlds reduced to cinders, civilizations wiped from existence. Star systems torn apart by superweapons of unfathomable power. Is this what you mourn? The woman asked. This madness? A cold realization settled over the delegation. The million-year war had not been a war at all. It had been a slow extinction. One by one, civilizations had risen, waged war, and collapsed. New empires had taken their place, only to suffer the same fate. Over and over again, for countless generations. If humanity had not intervened, the war would have never ended. The galaxy itself would have burned. A representative from the Seraph Union, a species known for their deep spirituality, spoke in hushed reverence. You are not warriors, she whispered. You are caretakers. The human representatives did not confirm nor deny. Instead, they simply asked, would you rather return to war? The chamber fell into silence once more. Because the truth was undeniable. None of them wanted to go back. They had been given something they had never dared to dream of. A future, no longer dictated by war, no longer bound to a cycle of destruction. But could they accept it? Could they truly live in peace? The Vornar representative finally lowered his gaze. His body language spoke of anger, but also resignation. And if we resist? He asked. The human woman sighed. You won't. It wasn't a threat. It was a statement of fact, because humanity had already ensured it. The technology they had deployed, the neural rewriting, the erasure of war tactics, the removal of strategic memories, was already, in effect, the knowledge to rebuild war fleets, to strategize galactic campaigns, to engineer new weapons, was gone. Not by force, not through conquest, but through the simple removal of war itself. The delegates exchanged glances. Some were horrified. Some were relieved. Some were still struggling to understand what their civilizations had now become. Then, finally, the Supreme Chancellor of the Zelkari spoke. What happens now? The human woman stood. Now? Now, you build. She gestured to the galactic map hovering above the table, once marked with battle lines and war zones. Your civilizations will evolve. Your people will create. The resources you once spent on destruction will go toward progress. She paused. This war is over, and so is the age of war itself. The delegates watched as the map changed. For the first time in recorded history, there were no war zones, no occupied territories, no battle lines, just the vast open expanse of the galaxy, waiting to be rebuilt. Humanity had not conquered the galaxy. They had reset it. And now, the future belonged to those who could imagine something greater than war. As the delegation left Earth, one final thought echoed through their minds. What else had humanity already planned? And was this truly the end? Or just the beginning? Conclusion and call to action. Imagine a world where war doesn't exist. Not because of treaties, not because of fear, but because it's simply impossible. Would it be a utopia? Or would it be a prison? Humanity's experimental fleet didn't just end a war, it rewrote the very fabric of civilization. But is that true peace? Or is it the ultimate form of control? What do you think? Should war ever truly be erased? Or does conflict have a necessary role in progress? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more mind-blowing sci-fi stories. The galaxy may never be the same again, but this is just the beginning.